We're fortunate to have Joyce Vance and Greg Bluestein sticking with me for more on what is at stake for former President Donald Trump's legal future in Georgia. Joyce, I want to go back to you again. Let's talk about the fact that Trump continues to appeal a decision made by Judge McBurney in terms of removing Fani Willis from that case, from his prosecution, as well as the release of that special grand jury report. Depending upon the outcome of that appeal, would that necessarily impact the prosecution of Donald Trump and others if the grand jury does return a true bill on Tuesday against him and the other co-defendants?
So I think first off, Katie, we should say that that effort by Trump is all but a dead letter. It's been rejected by Georgia judges up to this point. There's no merit to the suggestion. This is just the typical Trump bluster. Everyone is against him. It's a witch hunt. It's not going anywhere. But even if it did, its impact would be very limited. He has really two arguments. One is that Fani Willis can't participate in the prosecution. And in the extraordinarily unlikely case that that request were to be granted, she would simply be replaced with another prosecutor. The other part of Trump's argument, although completely meritless, is a little bit more complicated. It involves suppressing the work that the investigative grand jury did. It's entirely unprecedented. It's just impossible to contemplate a world where it would be granted. But even then, that does nothing to undercut the existence of the evidence itself, the facts itself. It would force prosecutors to jump through some hoops in a world where that motion was granted.
Greg, we've seen kind of a marquee lineup of witnesses that were either subpoenaed and voluntarily appeared or fought like cats and dogs against the system to do so. They run the gamut from Lindsey Graham to Brad Raffensperger, et cetera, and even Mark Meadows. Based upon your reporting and from what you know, being the boots on the ground in Atlanta, who do you actually anticipate being recognizable co-defendants of Donald Trump in the event a true bill is returned?
Well, in terms of the co-defendants, it's still very, very much up in the air. But we do expect, well, we know that about 20 letters have been sent to potential targets of this investigation, including members of the fake elector corps, including the former GOP chair David Schaefer, including Rudy Giuliani, John Eastman, other architects of the legal scheme to overturn Donald Trump's defeat here in Georgia, and including other allies of the former president. So we've heard all sorts of numbers out there about how many co-defendants there could be in this criminal indictment, but we're expecting several of his top allies to receive some, to at least be under legal scrutiny, under the legal microscope, as early as this Tuesday.
Joyce, we brought up the name Rudy Giuliani. That's what Greg just did. How complicated do things get? Let's noodle this for a hot second, right? Rudy Giuliani is identified as a co-conspirator unindicted in the federal case that's been brought by special counsel Jack Smith for the 2020 election interference that Donald Trump did. That case is currently pending. What happens if Rudy Giuliani actually ends up being a co-defendant in the Fulton County case with Donald Trump?
Well, it's a complicated situation, but there's nothing that prevents Willis from indicting Giuliani or anyone else. And to Greg's point about shifting numbers here, you know, this is the time for end games. And there are people in Georgia who this weekend are having to decide, do I want to be a witness or do I want to be a defendant? And so Willis herself may not know precisely how many people and who she's indicting. Until the weekend's bargaining is done, she may pick up another few cooperators along the way. That's always been a big question with Rudy Giuliani. It's tough to put him on the witness stand at this point. He's done so much to undercut his own credibility that it would be difficult to ask a jury to believe him. But if his testimony, if he were to cooperate, would be backed up by others and by documentation, then he could be a powerful witness in some ways. There is, though, no indication that he has gotten on board with Fani Willis or anyone else, and he could well be a defendant when we see this indictment unsealed.
Joyce Vance and Greg Bluestein, thanks for getting us started. Greg, I'll see you in Atlanta in a few hours, basically. Thanks, guys, for getting us started.
See you soon.